So welcome to the Class Year Scholarship session, everybody.
Thanks, Tanya. So I think Yaz and I are kind of co-hosts. Actually, we're a pretty small group, so I think it'll be an opportunity to actually go level 2 if we want to. And then depending on if we have more people join, we can pull it back as well. Let me pull up my slides if I can.
I just sent you the latest one, by the way.
Okay, except I'm trying to figure out how I share. Sorry, Tanya, if you're still on. How do I share?
You go to the bottom of the screen and it's there should be a green button there.
Share screen, yes, of course. Okay, thanks, Gabby. Yes, I haven't yet pulled yours up that you just emailed. I was.
That's fine. I can share my screen when we get there.
Okay, great. So Yaz and I are tag teaming here. Wanted to sort of share some experiences on the Class Year Scholarship effort from year 16, and then I'll turn it over to Yaz for year 19. I think some of you will know this information already, but I'll give you my take on what this has been like and where it goes forward. So we'll have like sort of 3 chapters here. One is how we started the journey at the 30th reunion in August 2019 and achieving our target for year 1. Year 2 was about growing what we call the core group and achieving our target again for year 2. And we are currently in year 3 and sort of give you a view of how year 3 looks for us and beyond. So about the start of our journey, there was a session, I think it was in East House. Was it East? The one directly opposite the cafeteria.
Calgary
House, thank you, Benoit. In Calgary House on fundraising. And at the time, the language was not specifically about class year scholarships. And there was a concept around, a living endowment. So the endowment for Pearson had diminished over the years. It was critical to rebuild that endowment. But in the meantime, could there be something like a living endowment, which is where alumni, if a number of class years were to raise a single scholarship every year or more, it was going to be a substantial component over time if you got to 20 class years that were achieving this goal. I forget the numbers, but it was perhaps something like about a quarter of what's the draw on the endowment in a year that could be covered in this way. So it was a great target to go after. And the group in the room, I think, felt very, very motivated. Simon and I sort of said, let's work together for year 16. And we had the real benefit in that first year of having the momentum of the auction. So Tanya, I just heard you say about signing up for the auction. I've had a very busy start to this new job, and I haven't been very present for this auction, but I'd be very supportive of that whenever it's done for that reason. It was a great sort of boost for our year because we got off to a great start. We then had an approach for the first year that was very inclusive. We wanted to engage the entire class. We put together a very comprehensive email list, and we shared with everybody this concept of wanting to raise a scholarship from the whole year. Then the pandemic came around, and what was planned to be an outreach We had a volunteer group of about 10 people, and they were going to reach, about 6, 7 people each. It felt like the timing of that right after the pandemic didn't feel right. No, people weren't feeling too comfortable about that conversation at that time. So we pulled back. We took away one key takeaway, which was that people wanted to be engaged without a fundraising component to it. So that was something that we had as a lesson from that experience. But we knew that obviously you need to talk to people to bring them on board. Around that time, one of the great things we did was we worked with Theron and the team to say, can we assign a scholarship to a particular student? It was assigned to Ellis from Estonia. And Carla came up with an idea of making a quilt, and individuals, alumni in our year could sponsor a square on the quilt. And that piece of the puzzle had to do with the fact that we had sort of known that we reached our target, and now we were aiming for participation. And Carla was absolutely brilliant. And as a result, together with the auction, we ended up raising more than what we needed for one scholarship. So I think the balance was available for additional portions of scholarship. And we hit a 36% participation rate, which I believe is the second highest in a single year at Pearson.
Which, sorry, John, I was going to say 2 things. I think that's fantastic, but also it's a little bit damning, I think, across Pearson, that actually 36 is actually such a high participation rate for other years. I think other years definitely should be ashamed, including our own year. But one thing that just hit me as you were describing this. So where does this quilt go? And could it be the quilt, for example, that you give to the recipient of the scholarship as their quilt on their bed?
It was given to Ellis.
Oh, it was. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, Theron gave it to her. Carla shipped it to the college, and Theron gave it to her. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
No, I hear you, Yaz. I think working on participation is critical. And let me touch on that in the next slide here. So we get to year 2. We've had this momentum. We knew we were successful because of the auction. We knew numbers were going to go down. So I have, I think, from the college's website and a little bit of an update, percentages of participation by calendar year and then versus the fiscal year. So that 36% was like a fiscal year number. It covered July 2019 through June 2020. And the reason it was high was because Carla's quilt brought in a lot of people, and that was in 2020. But if you look at participation after that window, actually, I'm about to contradict myself. So actually, I don't have the time frame perfectly. You'll see at the bottom of the slide, for the second fiscal year, we had measured a class participation rate of 31, which was pretty good. And I'll touch on why we got there. But prior to getting to the 31, we were hovering around 17. And so there was a pretty significant drop off after the reunion year in the amount of participation. The reason I think we picked it up back up to 31 was, for sad reasons, our classmate Deepa passed away. And we put out an email on the WhatsApp group to say that there was an initiative around helping sponsor a room renovation at Pearson. And a lot of contributions to Pearson from our year, but also between years 15 and 18 came through because of that connection that people had to Deepa. And I think that helped our participation rates. I'm not staying very linear today. Let me go back up. So that's the participation rate story. The Deepa room story is separate from the class year scholarship. I'm going to go back to the class year scholarship. We entered the start of the year 2, and we had not at this point connected with the entire class. There was a few people who we knew were quite actively involved. Many of those were people who were in the group of 10 volunteers who said they'd make phone calls. And it was time to try to really consolidate that group and say, are we a group, are we a team that is committed to making this happen? And behind the scenes, what we meant by that was, as a small team, if we had a shortfall in reaching a class year scholarship, would we all pick up the phone to each other and dig in deeper to make sure we reached a full scholarship? That was the idea, and I think we have that in our current core group. The core group started with about 4 people. It grew to a total of 9 people today. Rodolfo, who is a roommate of mine in Victoria House, became a co-lead for our year 16 efforts. We hit our year 2 target. I don't have the final dollar figure. It was, I believe, slightly under 70K. So we crossed the target, but we weren't where we were in year 1. But when I went out to people who became part of the core group, the story was what we call the 90% core group. And the idea here was to keep it very democratic. We said, look, this is the whole class. The job of the core is to reach 90%, and we know that the giving from the rest of the class should cover the remaining 10. So we'll always, all of us, jointly share the credit for the scholarship. Where we are today, we're getting closer to the core group actually covering 100%, which gives us a little bit of buffer if people's circumstances change. Then, Vipa passed away. A small number of people within the core group stepped up to say, we'll make an extra commitment around supporting the room. People managed to do it over 5 years, but it allowed us to recognize Vipa and share that initiative in the WhatsApp group that brought in lots of people. Looking ahead to year 3, we're at 9 people in the core group. I'll share for everybody's benefit. The core is, we try to always remind everybody, this is not an exclusive group. Anybody is welcome to join. The bottom line is not so many people want to be part of that mission around fundraising. We have in year 16 a little bit of a fortunate circumstance that this core group all hover between around $5,000 to $10,000 a year in giving. So there's a certain equality. There's an egalitarian component to the core, where we're all sort of contributing in a somewhat similar way. So it feels like a good common ground. But we want to expand that group from 9 to 12, and that has been a challenge. Where we are with 9, at this point, according to my estimates, we will be covering 1 scholarship every year. And what the rest of the class brings in would go beyond that. That old lesson we got to say we don't always want to have engagement that's around fundraising led to the effort to say, let's do something that engages the class twice a year in a relevant way. And earlier this year, Carla, we called on Carla again. She led a second from a repeat of the 30th year reunion. Maybe she did it again. She did a Zoom Taiko class. And that was fantastic. People wanted to do a cooking class later. I want to do a poetry reading later. And we'll definitely make the effort before the end of the year to bring together the group that was kind of the 30-year reunion. We can keep expanding. So it's about 4 or 5 years to advertise and bring them together for a common event that is just a way of connection. Growing the class participation. Honestly, I think, like I said, I think we're at 100% in the core group, but I don't want to I wouldn't advertise that. The goal really is to think about this as the 90-10, and actually even better would be 80-20. Whatever the core group brings in that might be additional can be thought about as a different effort, but the class year scholarship, the more democratic it can become, the better. The Vipa room effort, building an endowment. These are all new ambitious goals that have come forward. We're trying to fit that in within the architecture of what we do now as a class year scholarship, which is what I've described. And I'm not sure if we need a slightly different approach there, because I think there are some people in our core group where they're at the point where this is what they are committed to doing and they're not ready to go further. There are others who are sort of still open to doing more, and how to like tap into that and find additional people who are committed around something unique and specific is our next challenge. But I think we are, as a year 16, at the point where I think we can do the class year scholarship every year going forward, in my opinion. I think that's very exciting. For me, if that's all we do, the consistency will be important to me, but creating some space to go beyond that, I think is also very exciting. So that's where we are. I sort of like play the minor connective tissue role here in like keeping the core group together. I would say that's sort of fundamentally what I do. So they know that we still exist as a group. We're still, you know, aiming for something every year. The assignment of a student every year has been like a moment of celebration for the group, etc. So that's how we operate. Happy to take any questions, comments, or otherwise over to you, Yas.
Oh, that's so awesome. I had a question. When you say expand the core group from 9 to 12, does that mean those are the members of your class that are actively giving, or are they organizing so others and mobilizing others to give?
I would say the majority of this core group are happy to give. They don't want to like put in a ton of their personal time into it. So, and we are very grateful for that giving. So when I mean expand the group from 9 to 12, we have about 9 people now who give between 5 and 10K each year. Would like to make that about 12 people who do that.
Got it. Okay, so that's the average giving. That was my second question. It's 5 to 10K per year. Great.
That's for this the core group.
Get you the, oh, because it's a 60K, because you're targeting 60K per year.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. So I can talk about where we're at. We're obviously behind John, and I think you know his story is quite inspirational for us in year 19. So I don't know, Theron, if you want to talk about the Renew and Refound campaign, or should I just go on what we've been working on year 19, and then you can talk about the broader campaign.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Yas, and then I can add after that. Okay.
So, I mean, I do have slides, but actually, to be honest, it's such a small group, I think it'll be easier just to have a conversation. So we, I mean, we've approached it in a very similar manner. We do have a core group of about, I'd say 5-6 people who've put up the bulk of the money so far, and we're in the process of kind of doing the quilt, trying to expand that further. So we have about $186,000 committed over the next 5 years. Obviously, the target for 5 years to have a scholarship per year 19 over 5 years is 300,000 Canadian dollars. So I think but what's interesting listening to John's experience is that we were kind of thinking that, if we get to 200, we can get the remaining 100 from the broader group. It's proven a lot harder than we anticipated, I think. And when when John was speaking about expanding the core group, one thing we've been trying to do in expanding the core group is because it's some people don't have the time but can commit the money. Other people don't necessarily have as much money but can commit the time, because it's almost just like actually adding people to this core group that they have friends, different people have different connections within year 19 to get people to put the smaller amounts, because obviously it adds up. And also, of course, I mean, when we're talking about the 100K remaining, that's over 5 years. So actually what we're really looking at is getting a group, getting the remaining, 90 people in the year to put up essentially a 20K a year. So I think we're making good progress. I think we'll get there, but I do think, I mean, what's interesting about, John, you were talking about your core group really providing the bulk of the money, and then it's pretty much a bonus if anyone else contributes. I'm not quite sure we're at that stage where we can rely on our core group to basically commit forever. I mean, so I think but I do think that you do have the idea of kind of the time and the money, because I think we focused initially on the core group being those who can really contribute large amounts.
Yes, if I can, sorry about that. Just a quick comment about that. Like, I just want to reiterate, like, we definitely would think about our achievement of a class year scholarship as always including all the donations of all of our class. And so then if the core group contributions and the total ends up being more than we need, that's a great day. Just the semantics of that, because for us it's always been super important to recognize everybody wants to like be a part of like helping the college be sustainable. So just, I know you didn't mean that, but just to say that again.
No, absolutely. And then but also the other I think when we think about what we've been doing here, obviously in the beginning we've really been focusing on kind of getting the dollars in, but I think the really important point here is also that increased participation, right? Because that increased participation allows the school to go to external donors and say, oh, look, 80% of our alumni donate. It's embarrassing when they go out and say only 20% of our alumni donate. And so, it's kind of interesting because I remember, I mean, I've used this story with Darren, but like when I was at university in England, there was this guy who was, so he was doing a master's in Cambridge. He'd done his undergrad at Princeton, and he was, and he said, and he was sending like $10 to Princeton. Everyone was making fun of him, like all the English people who just don't donate to their universities, like Canadians. And he said, look, I'm a student, I can afford $10, so I'll send them $10. And if I just send whatever I can afford every year, it makes a big difference to the university. And it's like that mentality that, like, I think only the Americans seem to have it, and we just need to kind of get that through people's minds to a certain extent. That actually, if people feel like if they can't make a substantial donation, it doesn't matter, but actually it matters a lot. And it's interesting because, like, even when I've been having conversations with people in year 19, and they'd say, well, I'd love to help, but I can't donate. I'm like, well, we were not putting a number, like, any small amount, just get the participation rate up. So that's kind of where we're at. So right now we're kind of at 2/3 of our target, but the next step really is actually trying to get more year 19 members who just have a bit more time. And some people are connectors, right? Like they actually have the network, but not necessarily the financial means. And to be honest, they're probably more important than the people with financial. Everyone's important, but like, I mean, so I think we probably need a few more of those in our core group to really build it out.
I have a question, Yazan. I totally agree with you about getting engagement up. And as someone who hasn't been financially engaged, and Benoit and a bunch of other amazing Pearson College folks have been approaching me, I'm here because I want to be engaged. So I think that I love this whole philosophy of getting everyone to participate at whatever level they can. I'm curious if one of the things we're able to do is to say bring corporate sponsors. To your point around connections, can we leverage our connections to help the college? And can that be counted as part of our contribution? Because companies might be able to give more than we can. I'm curious about the whole philosophy of the college around accepting that, because I know for one of my other alma maters, Mount Holyoke College, they were strictly against accepting corporate sponsorship for a very long time. Then they opened up kind of in the last 5 years.
Darren, over to you.
I think there's always an open door to conversation, at least about connections and introductions. I would say, in my experience with philanthropy and fundraising, it makes a difference for any of us with the college or any other institution to kind of first put your weight down with your own giving of whatever is a personally significant amount for yourself. That amount is different for all of us. But to take that step, I notice in myself, whether it's my giving to the college or any other institution, it changes my whole relationship to that endeavor. So I always encourage people, like, start with that, your own just reflection on what you want to make, whether it's your monthly gift or annual gift or whatever that is. In terms of introductions, connections, we would love any and every conversation about that. And I find that they're all quite unique. So some of them have legs, some of them don't. Some of them quickly our team can say, probably not. We've been down that path. We've been on a similar path. So we are always, as a team, trying to basically, I mean, I'm literally aware coming in each day, like, how do I deploy my time for the greatest return for the college? So we're always thinking about that, and we will always kind of judge connections and introductions to put our time in the best possible place for the college. But yes, please.
Okay, so corporate, so Pearson is open to receiving corporate funds.
Definitely open.
Corporate foundation funds.
And foundation, corporate and foundation. I always manage people's expectations around that, in that in the US philanthropy market, corporate giving out of I think it's just shy of $400 billion a year that moves around in the US philanthropically each year. About 3% of that is corporate money, 2 to 3%. So it's the tiniest slice of the philanthropic pie and the hardest won. Foundations are next after that, in the like 12%-ish range. And individuals are the 80-some%. So I'm always happy and pleased to pursue the larger institutional relationships. They're harder to get, and there's less there to get. So it's always.
I'm in this space, and I can tell you that part of so much of individual philanthropic giving is it's about what moves people emotionally, right? And what resonates with them. So for example, if their mom was a widow and a working mom, they're going to support Global Fund for Widows. If they were a former refugee or know people that are refugees, they'll support the Women's Refugee Commission and so on. And so I think the challenge we have with Pearson is, and part of why we've been so reliant on alums, is because we are the most emotionally connected population. It's really hard to explain to others why they should be emotionally connected to Pearson. And in the range of philanthropies, right? There's like humanitarian crises unfolding all over the world. It's kind of hard to argue for why giving to Pearson is something that should be important to people. But I think it's actually a beautiful story. So a lot of this is a marketing, branding, packaging exercise to make the story resonate beyond the alumni community. And that's something I'd actually be happy to help work on, as well as working with Yazan in our year. So just wanted to put that out there. There's a marketing exercise involved that I think they have to be targeted depending on who the philanthropists are. To your point there, Ron, everyone's a very different story. And what resonates with every millionaire is really a different story.
Yeah. And funny enough, Annalisa, when I was thinking about a connector, you were the one in my head.
Itai, you've had your hand up for a little while.
And I think Gabby had her hand up earlier too.
Yes, sorry guys for joining late. I'm kind of navigating between work meetings, but really wanted to be part of this group. So if you won't mind giving me the headliners of what is our purpose at the immediate, I think I got the gist of it, but are we talking about an annual target that sponsors a single scholarship, or we're talking just to get a sense of the numbers? And then I have a few other questions once I get that.
Yes, that's the goal.
So Theron, that might actually be a good segue for you to talk about the Renew and Refound campaign more broadly.
Sure. So my main focus here has been around shaping and leading a larger campaign for all the college's longer term needs for the future. It's a $40 million campaign that we call the Renew and Refound campaign. And we're past the 25 million mark towards that. So we've made some great progress, and that's been the vehicle that's made it possible to renovate. We're finishing the last of the student houses this summer, and lots of work happening across campus, and lots of initiatives like the reconciliation and climate change initiatives all have the wind under their wings from this work. And all that we've been talking about here with class scholarships is all within that. It's encompassed in that. So that campaign is focused on scholarships, program innovations, and campus renewal, those three areas. And so the class scholarships is the way where the alumni can really lean in on the scholarship side of things. Some alumni have also chosen to make significant capital gifts or endowment gifts, but unless otherwise designated, if you're an alum from year X and you make a gift, it goes towards your class year's scholarship effort and towards that scholarship part of the overall campaign. So I often describe it to people, the class year scholarships, as like, it's the place that we as alumni can help move the needle on how many students get to be here on full scholarship. We all got to come on full scholarship, and for many of the financial reasons that I hope most of you have at least a general sense of, that's not been possible for a number of years now to be only full scholarship, and we're doing means testing. And so this is the place that we as alumni can say, how many more students could be here on full scholarship, or let's sustain those who most need the financial support to be here. So yeah, I think that's the big container. It's exciting to be this far along. I see a number of questions about what the cost per student is per year. It does track with inflation. So it was 60 last year. It's actually 61,360, I think, next year. And it tracks each year with inflation. The college didn't do that for a number of years so that the gap got wider and wider of inflation going up and tuition staying the same. So we're trying to, that's one of many things we're trying to do to really strengthen the long-term financial footholds of the college. I think another piece I would add, I see your question there, Ty, about an endowment. There is an endowment. Its value today is about 41 million Canadian, give or take. And there are some class year initiatives that are interested in, they're saying, okay, supporting a student each year is great. Got to keep the lights on and keep paving the way for a student to come and have the experience here on Pedder Bay. We also want to do something for the long haul. We're alumni. We're not going to be around forever. We want to do something though that lasts in perpetuity. So some of them are exploring how to endow a class year scholarship. The numbers on that, of course, are much bigger to endow something that then you draw 4% a year.
Remind us what is, the problem with the current rates, the endowment must be, how much you need to endow for a scholarship must be pretty high.
It is. It's $1.5 million to endow a scholarship right now. But we're looking at a couple of, actually just really in the, you could call it the R&D phase of how a class might do that. One group in year 13 has done a bunch of number crunching to figure out if their class donated 1.5 scholarships a year for 25 years, so kind of for the remainder of their lives-ish, and use the half into an endowment, they would fully endow a scholarship by that point. So that's one model that they're working on and experimenting with. Can they get their year up to the 1.5 and put the half in? I've noticed in other class years and other individuals and families are also doing endowments. And I notice once an endowment is started, it invites, just its existence invites giving. So for example, somebody way back, I don't even know who, started an endowment for John Wynne Hughes when he passed away. Many people have given over the years to that just because it existed. So I think in that year 13 example, even putting half a scholarship a year equivalent into an endowment, when an individual sells a property or has a chance to make a larger gift, or just many individuals want to contribute in that way, it will invite some of that. So the other way we're looking at growing endowments as a class is to figure out a way, this is very much on the drawing board, but figure out a way that people's estate gift intentions could be tallied so that we might know sooner than 25 years whether we've reached a goal of endowing a scholarship. And that's, for most of us, the time we can make our largest pledge. So many unknowns between now and hopefully a long time when that estate comes to fruition. But that's another way that that we're looking at people who might be considering or open to considering putting the college in their estate plans, would be a way to also add some building blocks towards a long-term picture of endowing a scholarship that would come alongside the current support of a student each year. So it's not instead of that. So hopefully that gives you the big picture of the campaign. We've made quite a good progress towards our 40 million goal. It is capital scholarships and some of these program innovations. And then we're working on some endowment initiatives with a few years. I see some chatter in the chat about government funds. When we were all there, basically the reason that we could all
get you the US side of a couple of initiatives of that. So I just did to know the Canadian terminology a little bit to get So that's a Canadian international. So they were a major source of a standing capital, and they cut to 6% now.
I think the simplest version of the story, Itai, is that this full scholarship policy was possible in our day because of federal support. They supported about 25 international students a year, and the provinces funded all of their representing students, and almost all that money's gone. So that's
what about the national committees? I mean, I know, for example, that the Israeli students had like a standing grant from the province. Because I had to write him a letter,
Yeah.
And then he invited me to Montreal, so I actually met him.
Oh,
it was
good
nice that he owned the Expos at the time, so we had good seats.
Yeah. Bronfmans are an amazing family.
But is that gone?
It is gone.
He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. He was a wonderful guy. But yeah. So no national committees, no government fundings from other places beside the Canadian.
No government funding. The national committees, there's 160 of them. They vary so widely. I mean, the German National Committee has paid staff and quite a sophisticated operation. On the far other end of things, so many of those national committees are all volunteer groups of alumni, many of them not even living in their home country anymore, but they were selected from that country, so they participate in selections remotely. It varies so widely across those 160 committees. Some do raise funds, some quite a bit. So some are able to provide a scholarship for their designated student, and some aren't at all. It ranges quite a bit.
But you're saying that there's some percentage that have like their national funding in a, let's say, a more or less reliable annual source.
I think Tanya's example is probably true of more committees than not that she just wrote. That they
I was going to say, I mean, the German committee, for example, and I'm sure they have the same conversations and struggle while they do provide funding for their national, but I'm sure it's everyone struggles.
Hey, Young, nice to see you.
Corporate sponsorship, that's something that we've considered.
I had a question on the numbers. So I saw it posted that for the class of 2023 from 87 countries, 53% are in full scholarship, 31% in partial, 16% in no scholarship. So this $40 million campaign, which is in Canadian dollars, right? Will that change the numbers? You know, the composition, and to what will it change the composition to? Will it be suddenly 80% full scholarship, or what will it look like after all these funds are raised?
Yeah, it's a great question, Annalisa. So, of course, with nothing simple with Pearson, so there aren't simple answers, but I'll try to give the simplest one. I can say that the board continues to hold an intention that that full scholarship level, students coming with all their fees paid, doesn't fall below 50%. I think it's helpful to understand what we mean when we say partial scholarship too. Every student who applies, unless they opt out of means testing and because they're planning to pay full fees, their family shares financial information with their national committee, and they assess what the family is able to contribute. Partial scholarship can mean anything from $5,000 a year to $50,000 a year. It's quite a wide range. And, the National Committee sort of philosophically has a lens like, well, if your child was home this year and you sent them to play field hockey or lacrosse or something, and you send them on some field trips and school trips and pay for their books, you're going to spend 10 grand or whatever it is. So that, there's some philosophically looking for families to contribute within their means towards students. And I would say it's you can look on the National Committee of Canada's website for a nice example of, I think if your household earns less than 120K a year, 150, you're contributing nothing. So it's relatively generous. And so I think that it just gives you a sense of what that partial means. It's quite a range. And then those students in that band paying full fees are paying the full tuition. This, in answer to your question of what this campaign would mean, I would love, I'm just speaking personally, me, Theron, year 16, I would love to see that needle move from 50% even to 60%, which doesn't sound dramatic, but it's 20 more students getting a full scholarship each year. And it's quite a lot of money. That's another $1.2 million a year that we're raising. So this campaign is really pegged at least sustaining that 50% full scholarship. I sometimes describe the campaign as everything the college needs to get done over the 6 to 8 year period of the campaign. It's, keep scholarships in place. It's fund some of these educational initiatives that keep the college relevant, and it's renewing the campus to be a place for this all to happen. So that said, class year scholarships really are the place to blow the roof off of that. It's the place that if we add another 10 or 12 years funding a full scholarship a year, we can start to move that needle. The selections process for UWCs is such a complicated international marketplace, probably most of you know, but you get 160 national committees, 18 colleges, and all the applying families just sort of in this soup of, every college puts out their offers, national committees try to fill them. Ones they can't fill, they go back in the hopper. And there's also the global selections process of families who opt out of the means testing because they intend to pay full fees, and then they get allocated out to the different colleges. It's quite complex how to move that needle, but I think class scholarships is as direct a way as we have as alumni to say we care about the full scholarship part of this experience, particularly for Pearson.
So if you
One
really
quick
want to
question,
have
Sarah.
more full scholarships, sorry, just to follow up on that. If you really want to have more full scholarships and move away from having 16% of the population paying and not being on scholarship, you really need more than 40 million, right? It sounds like you may need 50 to 60 million or something like that.
I think it's also helpful to see Pearson will be taking some amount of tuition for the foreseeable future until someone comes up with $150 million addition to our endowment. That's just the scale of gap. Right now, our annual budget is receiving over $3 million a year from national committees and individuals towards tuition. That gap, if you just do the math, you have to endow that gap and draw that amount at 4%. You have a massive infusion to our endowment. So it's a big reach to, that's the scale investment the federal government and the provinces were making that is gone now. And so getting there is a long game, not a short game. And so I just encourage.
It's really good to know, though. Thank you.
Yeah.
One quick question, Theron. I know that, for example, you can, because it's one of the things that we've been trying to do with all of the Venezuelan alumni, that you can direct donations through, for example, if you're in the US, Arm & Hammer, the American college, but earmark it for a very specific national committee or for another college, and then you can still take advantage of the tax deduction or the tax receipt, right? Is that something that Pearson has sort of tried to do with all of their alumni in the US?
So as Benoit notes, we actually, there's a US foundation that's purely a philanthropic channel to the college. So anyone living in the US can make a gift. It's even linked from the website. If you click US donation from the gift page on the website, it takes you, you don't know it, but you're then going through a portal of giving through this US foundation. You get a US tax receipt and the funds come to the college. So that's the best path within the US. And then
is there an equivalent in the EU?
there is an equivalent in the UK. So
The UK.
Yaz is based in the UK and makes his gifts through the international office so that he can get UK tax benefit. Other countries, it's there are alumni who do exactly what you're describing, Tanya. They give to their country's national committee towards a scholarship. That is it's for sure supporting students. It doesn't, we never really know that that's happening. So if you make a gift, Tanya, to the Venezuelan National Committee, let's say you funded a full scholarship and you gave that amount to the Venezuelan National Committee, unless you called me up and said, hey, Theron, I made this gift, it just is a check that comes from the National Committee. And maybe there's 10 people who contributed to that scholarship, or 2 companies and 7 people or whatever. We don't see any of that. We don't even actually know that you made a gift at all unless you reached out, and just because you wanted it to be counted in your class participation or something, we wouldn't know that at all. So it is a path, and it's varies so widely with how sophisticated a national committee is, whether they can provide you a tax receipt. Some national committees just aren't even incorporated in as a tax exempt entity in their country, so they can't provide that, or they don't have, they're just doing selections basically. They don't have somebody doing bookkeeping or filing taxes or being a legal entity in that way, and other countries definitely do. So varies by country.
And that's a problem sort of in the engagement numbers, right? Because some people may have decided to give their money to their national committees because there's a more urgent need, or a better link, or a relationship that's closer, and
Absolutely.
yet Pearson is not counting this as engagement, but it is engagement.
It's absolutely engagement, and we would love to count that engagement. If you imagine, if you put on your database hat for just the briefest of seconds and imagine 160 ways of keeping track of money in 160 currencies, and how you're going to communicate that information back to Pearson's database with Canadian privacy laws, it's basically impossible. So we would love to count that beyond, though, the sort of voluntary communication of somebody in Germany writing to us and saying, hey, I give through the national committee. It's technically very difficult. We would love to count it. If it was simpler, we would already be doing it. So,
Theron, I know we're coming up on, we're coming up on the hour. I just had a question. From the 30-year reunion back in 2019 to where you are now, I feel you've made a lot of progress, and I'm sure you always like looking at like what's still left to go. But wouldn't that be a fair statement? It has been a very positive 2 years since 2019, or maybe even before that. But
It really has. Carly's now our lead for our whole advancement effort, and we should introduce Carly. She's coordinates all of our advancement work across alumni and communications now, and that the works even since those 2 years. You're right, John has. I don't know what we would have been at 2 years ago in the campaign, but it would have been for sure shy of the halfway mark. Maybe we were at 15 or 18 million or something. So, and just looking in the work that's been, I'm of course, as a fundraiser, I have to track the dollars towards the goal, but I take much more satisfaction in the numbers of scholarships that we've raised since then, in the fact that we finished all the student residences at $1.5 million a pop, that we've got we have an Indigenous reconciliation action plan and initiative that other universities across Canada are like, wow, ambitious. We're not going that far. So we're doing some great work there. And likewise on our climate change work, really creating it. Hopefully some of you got to hear Craig's State of the College, but the curriculum initiatives that he's putting forward, I think there's good reason to hope that they'll lead the way in the UWC movement on what education could look like and how students here could be equipped for making a difference around climate change. So I take most satisfaction from seeing that good work that has been accomplished thanks to this campaign. And yes, in just those last 2 years, 2 student residences, for example, have been completed. So
yeah, I just bring it up just to maybe quickly say thank you to you, to Carly, the team. And the part about like 160 currencies and so on, I'm so aware of like how much you're willing to like engage one-on-one. And I can only imagine how much you're doing of that kind of thing, which is so like retail as opposed to kind of an institutionalized. I'm sure you'd like to get to the point where it's not like, mom and pop and John and somebody else, with their small issue and email. So for all of that, just a quick thank you.
thanks, John.
I'd like to second that. And I mean, and the persistence that you guys have, and it's very, very impressive. And almost to the point that sometimes when I need to speak to someone and then Theron just gets tired of waiting for me, he just writes the email for me, sends it over to me, says, send this, stick your name on it.
And to the year 17 and 18 and how to get things off the ground. There's no magic wisdom here that I have. It really is a little bit about just somebody who is going to be persistent. And even in my own case, you have to come back and re-energize yourself, because you can feel worn out from time to time. So if somebody is on that edge but needs a little bit of energy, yes, I'm sure you're happy to do this. I am very happy to do this, to just sit down and chat and you start with small building blocks. How do you get started? How do you start to form your community that gives you strength to have that persistence? So that's one thing I would say. And then Theron, back to you. I do feel year 16 is at a wonderful plateau. Where do we go from here? Can we be much more ambitious? Let's chat about that.
Yes, agreed.
Actually, before Theron takes that, I do want to say one other thing in addition to John, was actually leverage Theron and Carly. And so, if you're thinking of starting your own core group, get a few of you together, but Theron and Carly are there to help, and they've been amazing.
And we have another colleague, Jackie Terry Carroll, who's almost exclusively dedicated to class scholarships. So we can give a lot of support for this if you're ready to jump in that stream.
Okay, very quickly, Gabby, we need to close as the next session is already starting.
Just another real quick one.
I really
How
want
about corporate sponsors?
to thank John for persevering and for all the passion, effort, and generosity that you've put over the years, and because you've been an inspiration. And I think well, it shows in the numbers, it shows in the good participation. And I think we should take good advantage of the engagement that we have like now, because many more people are engaged. One of the experiences I had when I was part of the people calling other people is that some people felt that, oh, now they're just reaching for me because of money. But now that many people have been into the conversation, other conversations that had nothing to do with fundraising and money, now probably we're kind of warmed up into the fact that the college is that the conversations are like there is a lot of variety in the conversations rather than just that. We could probably take more advantage. Thank you so much, John. You've done a great job.
Thank you, everyone. We'll be
Thanks, Gabby.
stopping the session
Thanks,
now.
yes.
Thank
It
you.
was great to work together.